Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Juwan Howard and his team are struggling over the last month, especially on the road, but so is everyone else in the Big Ten. Joining us on our Game Day segment this week will be beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. But first, let's get it started with a few of my thoughts. The football hot stove season is in full swing now. With LSU impressively beating Clemson in the national championship game, the season is officially over. The big news this week on the Michigan football scene was Chris Partridge leaving to take the DC job at Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin. Now, he deserves that opportunity, and we should all wish him well, but he leaves a huge hole on the Michigan staff. We should find out soon who Jim will hire to replace him, and most agree we need a top-notch coach who is also a great recruiter. This is a very important hire, to say the least. I'm trying to keep the focus on basketball for most of the programs this winter, but as always, we will spend time talking football. In the next few weeks, we'll get Steve Lorenz back on the show with his thoughts on what's happening in Michigan football and the always crazy recruiting world. Juwan Howard's team has come back down to earth after a hot start. Sure, not having Isaiah Livers hurts, but the defense has struggled, and the offense has been good, but not good enough recently. I still think we're an NCAA tournament team, but we have to pull it together and get back on track very soon, and that will not be easy. My guest today still thinks Michigan has the pieces to make the big dance. Joining us next is beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News on this week's Michigan Man, in partnership with our friends at SB Nation's Maize and Brew. So stay with us. Here with us on our Game Day segment this week as we talk a little Michigan hoops to get things going is beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. James, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me back, Mike.
Well, on Sunday we saw Michigan struggle up in Minneapolis against Minnesota. Once again, we had trouble with the post defense stopping Daniel Orturo. He had a career day. I know fans are going to say, hey, it's all on John Teske, these struggles lately, but it's more complicated than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a multitude of things. It is. I mean, John is struggling. I mean, he's been put on an island, guarding these guys one-on-one. And I think if you just think back to what Michigan did well last season, I mean, Michigan did a good job of taking away the three-point shot and making teams take tough two-point shots. And I mean, the strategy with Juwan Howard is he wants to eliminate the three-point shot, which they have done a good job of. I mean, if you look at the stats, I mean, they have given up the fewest three-point shots by a wide margin so far in the Big Ten. But the problem is just that what John Teske did so well last season was, if you look at how Michigan defended teams, he did a good job at hard hedging ball screens and, kind of preventing guards from getting down into the lane. And he did a good job recovering, back to his guy in the paint. And then when guards or perimeter players did penetrate the paint and kind of get to the lane, he did a good job of rotating over and contesting shots and, walling up and making things tougher on the rim. But I mean, they're just not playing that way this season under Juwan Howard. So everything's basically one-on-one. And so that means, with Daniel Orturo against Minnesota this past weekend, you saw there were several times where Orturo would get the ball out on the, out at the 3-point line, and then Teske would have to go out there to defend him because, like how Juwan Howard wants him, they want him to play one-on-one. And, Orturo just had a quick first step, and there were several times where he got it and he just put it right on the floor and just drove right to the rim. I think they're just asking, Teske is, like I said, he's not used to defending this way, and I think it's just stretching him out more. And, last season he was just better, when he was just kind of staying around the rim, or like I said, when he was hard hedging ball screen. So, and a lot of it too is, I mean, Teske's not the only person who's struggling one-on-one. I mean, a lot of other guys are as well. I mean, look at Marcus Carr, kind of killed Michigan in the second half too, just consistently getting into the lane and scoring around the rim or creating for other guys. And yeah, it is a multitude of things. And the one thing is that you think Juwan Howard's going to have to do something to change this defense, because the one thing John Beilein always did was he always, adapted and changed things to his team's strengths. And I mean, if you look at what they're trying to do with this defensive strategy, I mean, you could say it's half working. I mean, they are, doing a good job of defending the three and taking it away, but they're also giving up way too many easy layups and baskets around the paint. And I think once you start to do that, I think it helps simplify game plans for other teams. I mean, Daniel Oturu and Marcus Carr after the game admitted, they're like, yeah, we know Michigan's not going to double in the post, so they're just going to continue to, they just fed Daniel Oturu, and that's all they ddid. I mean, you saw against Purdue, that's what the Boilermakers did with Travion Williams, and that's the same thing Matt Painter said. He's like, if they're going to play him one-on-one, I'm just going to continue to give it to him. The same thing Graham McCaffrey said when Michigan defended Luka Garza one-on-one, and we saw how that ended up. So I think this is one of those things. I mean, Juwan Howard's going to have to go back to the drawing board and maybe tweak some things, because, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like insanity. I mean, it's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And so far through these 5 Big Ten games, I mean, Michigan's defense ranks last in, field goal percentage defense. They rank last in scoring defense. So clearly something's not working. And so we'll just see kind of how, what adjustments Juwan Howard needs to make. And I think obviously just given the way, Big Ten men have kind of went off every single game against Michigan, the first thing would be to maybe not have to double every single time a big touches it, but you got to start to throw, a variety of looks, have a guy dig down or flash down and maybe make the big man pick up his dribble soon. Because, I think they're just allowing guys to just get into a rhythm and get comfortable way too early in games. And we've seen how that's been playing out so far.
Yeah, we have. And, we know it's not a lack of effort. And we have different personnel on the floor this year as opposed to last year. But when I was watching the game on Sunday, I was thinking, you know what? It really makes you appreciate what a great defender Charles Matthews was, because he changed what the other team was doing on the floor too, didn't he?
Oh, for sure. I think that's the biggest thing. I know Luke Yaklich, he was the de facto defensive coordinator last season, and he did a good job, at the helm of, Michigan's defense the 2 seasons he was here. But yeah, I mean, Charles Matthews was he was a huge part of what Michigan was able to do defensively and the success they had. I mean, he was really a lockdown guy. I mean, just because of his length and athleticism was just gave people fits. I mean, you think back to last season, what he was able to do. I mean, he was guarding, teams' point guards at certain points. He was, guarding their top perimeter player. And I mean, Michigan just really doesn't have that guy on the roster, just like a lockdown, shut down perimeter guy. I mean, Franz Wagner has good defensive instincts, and I mean, he could eventually be that type of player. But I mean, he is a freshman, and he's not quite to that level yet. So I think, that was a huge key to Michigan's success on defense the last 2 seasons, was having a guy like Charles who could switch any screen and just guard, 1 through 4, seamlessly and just make everything tough no matter who he defended. And Michigan just doesn't have a guy like that on the roster, and you're kind of seeing that, play out this season.
Well, I'm not trying to make excuses for the defense. I don't think anyone is, but we have played arguably the toughest schedule in the Big Ten so far. And, when you look around, it seems like we know the trend in college basketball has moved away from post play, big men down low. Big Ten, though, is a different story, and we have an abundance of big, talented post players in the conference, don't we?
Yeah, I think this is my 4th year on the beat, and I think this is by far the year where they have the best talent at the big man spot. Like, you just look at every team. I think if you look at every roster, there's a big name, as a big man. I think the only 2 teams you can maybe say there isn't really a big name is maybe Nebraska and Northwestern, and those are, 2 of the, the teams towards the bottom of the standings in the Big Ten. But I mean, and you think about it too, like who the teams that Michigan still hasn't even faced. I mean, they still have to face Penn State, who has like Mike Watkins and Lamar Stevens, and they still got 2 games against Ohio State, who maybe has one of the best big men too, in Caleb Weston. This Friday they face Luka Garza again, who's playing like an All-American, and he's like leading the Big Ten in scoring, and he's just been a double machine. It's just it is kind of insane. Just every single game, there's just it's just like, it seems like it's just a stud big man that Michigan is going up against. And I mean, that's the one thing too, is with the whole defensive strategy against post play, it's just, I mean, I get like maybe in years past that could work just because, I mean, maybe every team didn't have a really standout big man, but I mean, this year in the Big Ten, it's just every single team. You can just go through, like I said, it's like 12 of the 14 teams. You look at the rosters, and it's just every guy just has like a standout big man, and that's the one reason why I think, Michigan just got to rethink its strategy, because I mean, so far they faced five different big men, and so far 5 different big men have really kind of given Michigan fits so far this season.
Absolutely, and I'm sure Juwan is looking at doing something, changing something up. But Daniel Arturo, I'm not going to be too hard on John Teskey on Sunday about that. Yeah, he could have played better. but that guy he's different. I mean, he can take you outside. He can hit from 3-point land. He can put it on the floor and beat you dribble drive. He is a very, very multi-dimensional offensive threat.
Yeah, he showed a little bit of all that, yes, on Sunday, and I think he was. I mean, you look at how the scoring went for Minnesota. I mean, none of their guards even made a three before. I mean, he made the first 3-point shot for their team on Sunday, and I mean, it was just insane what he was able to do throughout that entire first half. I mean, he single-handedly carried, the Gophers through that first half. I think he had 20 points on 9 of 12 shooting. So yeah, I mean, he was single-handedly just carrying that team, and he, like I said, I mean, he gets the ball out on the 3-point line. He can, he had a quick first step. He was able to just to get right by John Teskey, kind of get to the rim. And the one thing he kept doing is he had a really impressive spin move. He would just, get guys on his hip and then just spin, whoop, lose the guy, and then, just go up with his left or his right and just finish right at the rim. And I mean, he was, battling on the boards, getting, putbacks. And yeah, I mean, he was doing a little bit of everything. And one of the most impressive things for me is you think of big men and you don't think about, the minutes they can play. I mean, I think he was averaging over 37 minutes or something a game, which is almost unheard of when you think of, big men and just think of the physicality of, the Big Ten playing guys just, banging in the post. And I mean, on Sunday, he still played almost 35 minutes. And I mean, and that includes the 3 or 4 minute stint where he kind of left the game when he kind of had that hard fall and he said his shoulder kind of slipped in and out a little bit. That's just crazy in itself that he was able to come back from that. And then even after suffering a scary fall like that, he came in and Michigan just had no answer for him. And and you look at how the game, you look at the final 6 minutes, you look at the final 3 minutes of the first half and the final 3 minutes of the game in the second half. And I mean, he was the guy that kind of sparked those late runs that they had. I mean, they closed the first half an 11-1 run, and he had a few baskets down the stretch there that kind of helped them, turn a 10-point deficit to a 1-point deficit and really change the momentum of the game. And then, late in the second half, it was when, Eli Brooks hit that big three to kind of give Michigan that 1-point lead late in the game. And then who was it that came right back and answered? It was Oturu. I mean, He came right down and spin move, layup, and then that kind of sparked that late run for them and kind of helped them put the game away.
Well, we're focusing a lot on the problems with the post defense, but Minnesota, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, was getting into the paint almost at will on Sunday with dribble drive penetration. I mean, even Xavier Simpson was getting beat and struggling. And I was thinking as I was watching this week, is the fact that he needs to do more on offense this year for this team maybe affecting his defensive performance some?
Maybe. I mean, I'm not sure. I think he's still playing a lot of minutes. I mean, him and Marcus Carr, I mean, they both didn't sit at all. I mean, they both played all 40 minutes. So there might be, I mean, he might be exerting more, energy on the defensive end, but I mean, if we were to ask Xavier Simpson that, I don't think he'd use that as an excuse, just because I think he's been logging these heavy minutes. I mean, he's used to, he logged heavy minutes all last season, so I don't know if that's really been an effect, but I mean, yeah, I mean, he has had some struggles, but I mean, I think it just goes back to kind of just this, the defensive strategy. And I think every guy would just say that they need to play better one-on-one. And I think, last season, I mean, Xavier Simpson is still a very good, on-ball defender, but I think it's just a lot of times these guys have just been kind of put in tough situations. And I mean, Xavier's just kind of one of those guys, but I mean, I don't know if him trying to take on more of a scoring role really affected his defense. But yeah, I mean, he has had to try to step up. I mean, just with Isaiah Livers being out, someone's kind of going to have to kind of step up and take on more of a role. And I think he admitted that before the Purdue game, that, I mean, he is looking to try to score more, just because, I mean, it's no one single-handedly is going to replace, Isaiah Livers' production and the 14 points he was averaging. So you're going to kind of need a multitude of guys to step up. And I just think Xavier's just been one of those guys these last 4 games who's just been trying to, I guess, take on more of a larger role on offense, just to kind of help make up for that lost production that they have with Livers off the floor.
And, on offense Sunday, I thought we moved the ball really well. We're getting good open looks all day. They just weren't going down. So the shooting woes on the road continue, though, don't they? From the outside, the perimeter game.
Yeah, I mean, they still made enough threes. I mean, you look at, they made 10 threes, and you think of what it takes to maybe win a road game. I mean, usually you make 10 threes in a game, you have a pretty good shot of stealing a win there. And I mean, they started off hot from from the game and from three-point line, I think they made maybe 6 of their first 9 three-point attempts or something like that. I mean, they made their first 4 attempts of the game, and then they had like a rough stretch. I think they missed like, I think they only made like 5 of their last 14 attempts or something like that maybe skewed the numbers and made it seem like it was a rough game. I mean, they got off to a good start, and I mean, at the end of the day, you look at the stats, they made enough to steal a road game. But yeah, I mean, there were several open looks. The ones that kind of stand out is in that first half when they were kind of building that lead. There was a couple corner attempts that Eli Brooks had that were wide open, and he missed. And yeah, that was kind of the theme looking back to some of the other road games they had at Illinois and at State. They had open looks. I think Michigan State, though, I think that was more of a hesitancy. I think they had open looks, and then they just kind of passed them up, or they were just took a split second too long to shoot shots. Illinois, I think it was a fact. Yeah, they just didn't get shots to fall. I mean, I think they weren't trigger shy in that game. I think they were taking their open looks and they just couldn't get nothing to drop. But yeah, Minnesota was kind of the same way. Like the Illinois game, they had open looks and they just couldn't get them to drop. And like I said, I think the two that really stand out were the two in the corner that Eli had right when they were building that lead. That really could have really built that margin and kind of widened the gap. And the one thing that really didn't kind of make sense with the rotation that Michigan had was David DeJulius came in early and he knocked down 2 threes when they were building that lead, and then he sat and Adrian Nunez came in, and I really didn't understand that after David was kind of playing well and they put in Adrian for a few minutes, which kind of really didn't make much sense given that David was playing well and he knocked down 2 threes early. But yeah, I mean, I think they kind of shook off their woes a little bit, but yeah, they had that rough stretch after they kind of got off to the hard start where they just couldn't get shots to drop. But I mean, end of the day, you make 10 threes on the road. I mean, you have a pretty good chance of kind of stealing a win in. And I mean, at the end of the day, Michigan did. I mean, they had the lead with, under 3 minutes to go, but they kind of just fell apart in those final 3 minutes.
As far as outside shooting goes and offense in general, I keep waiting for Franz Wagner to catch fire, and that's asking a lot for a freshman. But overall, I mean, he got sort of a late start with the injury, granted, but what do you think of his play so far?
It's been a little bit up and down. I mean, he's had some big games. I think his best game so far was the overtime game against Oregon. I think he scored over 20 in that game. I think that's been probably his best game so far this season. And I mean, it seems like he's had like quiet games. I don't know if he's really had that breakout game where he's really kind of just like wowed people. I mean, it's kind of like you looked at the Purdue game. I mean, he scored 15, but it was kind of like a quiet 15. And then against Minnesota, I mean, he scored 17. So I mean, he was second in the team in scoring there. But yeah, I think a lot of people are just kind of waiting for him to kind of just make that big splash, have that big game where he really just kind of takes over on offense, and he really hasn't had that yet. But I mean, yeah, it is tough. I mean, he kind of, as we all know, he missed the first 4 games with that fractured right wrist, and I mean, yeah, he kind of had to get into game shape and kind of get his rhythm, kind of on the fly here during the season. I think you're starting to see that. I think his he's starting to make threes. He kind of got off to like a slow start from 3-point range, because as we know, that was kind of his label kind of coming into the season. From when he played Alba Berlin, he was known as like a perimeter guy and a 3-point threat, and he kind of got off to like a slow start from 3-point range early on. But I mean, you look back, I mean, against Purdue, I mean, he made 3 outside shots, and I mean, against Minnesota, he was the only guy to make. Him and David were the only guys to make more than 1 3. I mean, he made 4 in that game. So I mean, I think he's kind of starting to get back into shape. And the weird thing is too, with like his, it being his right wrist that got injured, you wonder if it was like affecting his shooting form and anything like that. And he said it isn't. But I mean, if you just look at these past few games, it seems like he's maybe starting to get more comfortable, get more in a rhythm. Like I said, he's kind of made multiple threes in these last few games. So hopefully that's a sign that there's more things to come. But yeah, I think with him, it's just, like I said, it just seems like he's never had like a big game. I mean, you look at the Oregon game, he made big shots. He kind of took over in one stretch there early in the second half, and in overtime too, he hit that big 3-point shot that kind of gave Michigan the lead. But aside from that, I don't know if like you can really look at any moment so far in these games where you think like, oh man, he really took over during a stretch. And I think that's kind of the one thing people are waiting for. But another thing is too, is that with Isaiah out, Isaiah was getting a lot of attention on defense, and you kind of wonder what opponents, who they're keying in on offense. And maybe Franz is that guy. Maybe teams are focusing a little bit more on. Maybe it's Eli Brooks. You kind of don't know what defensive game plans are. So, but yeah, I think a lot of people are still just waiting for maybe him to kind of have that one big breakout game, and maybe that or maybe that one dominant stretch where he really just kind of takes over a game. That hasn't happened yet, but Juwan Howard, as we know, I mean, it was maybe 5 games into Franz's career, and he already said he could be one of the best players to wear a Michigan jersey. So it's plenty high praise. I think we're all just kind of waiting to see what maybe the Wolverines have been seeing in practice, and maybe just see Franz kind of have this big breakout moment.
Here at the Center Game Day segment this week, talking Michigan hoops, is beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. You know, James, a lot of fans I hear from say, don't worry, we're struggling now. We'll get better when Isaiah Livers comes back. Can he really be that kind of the difference maker?
I think when you look at this, I think you could make a case that he is Michigan's best player just based on what he can do. I mean, he's just so versatile on both ends of the floor. I mean, he can guard, every position on defense, 1 through 5. And then, I mean, on offense, I mean, he just is their best outside shooter, their best perimeter threat. And I mean, the things he can do to impact the game that maybe just doesn't show up on the stat sheet is just, I mean, the threat he poses on offense. I mean, teams, he's more of a focal point this season as he was, opposed to last season, obviously, when he was, more of just a 6-man and played a smaller role. But I mean, kind of as a key guy this season, I think, defenses, opponents were maybe keying in on him more, and that was just the threat of that alone was allowing teammates to get open shots, and he was maybe opening things up for other guys just because opponents were maybe giving him more defensive attention than other guys. So there is a lot that he brings and that he provides. And yeah, it's just because he's just such a versatile piece. Like I said, he can defend out on the perimeter, defend in the paint. He can switch anything. He can effectively guard anybody on the court. I mean, he gives Michigan that ability to, as we saw last season, if they want to go super small with him at the 5, I mean, they can. And then, yeah, just offensively, his ability to kind of, he's been doing a little bit of, he can maybe get his shot a little bit on his own. He can drive, kick out. He can knock down the threes, as we know. And I think that's just the biggest thing is just, Michigan had a couple guys that were shooting, above 40% from three-point range. But, I mean, yeah, I think Isaiah just, on offense, he just opened up so much for so many guys, and he just opened up the offense for them. And the big thing was spacing. I mean, you look back at that Purdue game, too, just when they kind of had, Brandon Johns at the 4, he's just not as much of a three-point threat, and it's just kind of clogging things in the middle a little bit, and the offense just kind of was having trouble getting open looks just because they weren't able to get much spacing just because Brandon Johns just doesn't provide that same threat that Isaiah provides. And you look at when, Michigan, when their offense was just like humming along, it was because, Isaiah was there and they were just able to knock down open shots, and they were just able to spread the defenses out just because of the threat that he helps provide. And just with him not there, and I think you're kind of seeing it more, I feel like, on the offensive end, where there's been times where the Wolverines have struggled to maybe space the floor here, especially in Big Ten play, and as we know, when there's more scouting reports and everyone knows everyone a lot more. I think that's just his absence. I think we're just seeing more on the offensive end these last few games with their ability to kind of stretch out opponents and stretch the defenses.
And we still really do not have a clear idea when he will be back, do we?
No, I think the problem with that is that when he was announced, we were told that he was going to be ruled out indefinitely, and that was late in December with a groin injury, and we still don't even know the severity of the groin injury. I mean, it could be a pull, a strain, it could be a tear. I mean, we don't know the severity of it. And I mean, groin injuries are fickle. I mean, it's just one of those things where there's really nothing you can do to kind of help the healing process and help get, recover from that quicker. It's just one of those things where you just have to let your body recover. And yeah, I think the problem is that they announced he was out indefinitely, the following week after that game against Presbyterian. And then the next week, Juwan Howard, we would ask him for an update, and then he said he's basically day-to-day, and that was going on 2 weeks ago. And I think when most people hear day-to-day, that signals he's close to a return. So I think that's just kind of been the problem with this whole situation is just that I think, like I said, when people hear day-to-day, you expect, okay, he's close to a return. But as we know, that's been almost going on 2 weeks ago. And just based on the sounds of it, he really hasn't been able to do much in practice. It sounds like he's only been able to kind of, run up and down and really do conditioning stuff. It doesn't sound like he's suiting up and actually taking part in drills during practice. And we have no idea like how far along he is in his rehab. No idea if he's cutting, jumping, doing any of those things, because like I said, groin injuries are fickle things, and I mean you don't want to do anything to kind of suffer a setback, because you don't know how long it's going to take to recover from that if you aggravate it. So yeah, that's the thing. It's just kind of, there hasn't really been much clarity. We just keep hearing that he's getting better day by day. And as far as when I think this week it's going to be close to 4 weeks since he's been injured. So I mean, if it is a groin strain, because he was initially diagnosed with a muscle strain. Mm-hmm. I think groin strains, like I said, it just depends on the person, but that could be like I think if you look at WebMD, it's like a 6-week injury. So he still could be sidelined the next 2 weeks. I mean, who knows? I think, like I said, the problem is just that we were never told the severity of the injury. And the timeline with it, I think kind of, like I said, it just hasn't been much clear, because going from indefinite to day-to-day in the course of a week, I think really kind of muddled things and really didn't provide a clear picture of I guess, how long they expected him to be out. But just like I said, by the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like he's doing much at practice. And after the game against Minnesota, I asked Coach Howard if he was able to do any more in those 2 games leading up to that game as opposed to before the Purdue game, and he said we'd have to ask Isaiah, and we haven't been able to speak to Isaiah since he got injured, so that just hasn't really helped clear up anything. So I mean we'll see. We won't get an update until Thursday before they head to Iowa on Friday about if he's been able to do anything. But just based off what his teammates have said, it doesn't sound like he's been able to do much of anything in practice. So that just doesn't really seem like he's getting that much closer to a return.
Well, I thought last week getting a split would be good, and we did. Won at home, lost on the road. But now it's back on the road to Iowa on Friday night, Carver Hawkeye Arena, which to me is a place Michigan never seems to play well. And here we go. Another great post player, arguably the best in the Big Ten, and a team that really has a lot of weapons on offense. But luckily, they don't have a good defense either, do they?
No, I mean, we've already seen this kind of play out the first time when they kind of opened Big Ten play against each other. I think it was like 101 to 94 or something like that. Yeah. It was quite the shootout, and I think that's probably we might see the same thing again. I mean, who knows? But yeah, it's just the weird thing of the Big Ten is, as we all know, it's so hard to win on the road. And I think most recently they hosted Maryland, and they just waxed Maryland, I think by 20 points or something like that. So yeah, it's gonna be a difficult for Michigan to go in there and win. I mean, like you pointed to it, it's been a difficult place for them to go in and win last season at all. I mean, you look at the last season. I remember, I think that was a game where everyone got in foul trouble. I think they had like half their starting lineup had 3 fouls or something like that, and that was a game that they lost by double digits and really never competed in that game. And so it's gonna be quite the challenge. And I think, like we were talking about earlier, it's going to be interesting to see what they try to do with Luka Garza. I mean, especially on the road, if you let a guy like that kind of get onto a roll early, then you're going to kind of let the crowd get into it. And then, so it'll be interesting to see. It's going to, like, as you point out, it's going to be a tough test. As we know, every game on the road in the Big Ten is going to be a huge challenge. I don't think there's any place you can point to. I don't even know if you can point to Northwestern and Nebraska as being easy places to win. Because as we've seen through, the first few weeks of Big Ten play, only 4 teams have won on the road. That's, Wisconsin's won a couple times, but they've also lost at home to Illinois. Illinois won on the road. Michigan State's won on the road. Rutgers won on the road. So not a lot of teams have had success on the road. And it was kind of one of those weird teams where you kind of don't know what team you're going to get. But we saw that they can put up points in a hurry. They hung 90 plus points on Michigan. I think that's the most Michigan's allowed all season. And at home they're going to be quite the challenge, just because they've been really like I said, they thumped Maryland on the road, or they thumped Maryland at home already. So it's going to be a tough challenge. And like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what they try to do with Luka Garza to try to maybe slow him down a little bit. But yeah, that's a place where you really don't want to fall behind. Really, you don't want the crowd to kind of get into that. So yeah, I think it's going to be a tough test, and Michigan's going to have to. They're going to have to make their 3-point shots. They're going to have to, not turn the ball over. They're going to have to kind of, limit Iowa in the 3-point range, which they were able to do that first time. But yeah, they're going to have to do a lot of things well. They're going to need some guys to step up on the road, which they've kind of haven't had happen so far this season. So you're going to need a multitude of things to happen for them to kind of pull out a road win to kind of pick up their first true road win here this season.
Well, last question for you, James. Michigan has, as we know, plenty of work to do on both sides of the ball, and that's fine. It's not even the middle of the Big Ten season yet. But in the last 2 weeks, have you seen anything that, makes you think this might not be an NCAA team by March?
Yeah, it's just been tough just because I think the parity in the Big Ten this season has been incredible. I mean, any team is capable of beating anybody on any night. And so that's what maybe makes, some of these, it just puts in the focus that Michigan is just going to have a hard time winning on the road. And I mean, you're going to have to defend home, and Michigan's going to have to host Michigan State, and they're going to have to host Ohio State. So they're going to have tough games at home that they're going to have to win. And I think the problem though is that just given the start that Michigan had this season when they got off to a 7-0 start, I think that really kind of raised the bar and raised, the expectations for the team. But as we've seen, North Carolina has really just fallen off a cliff, and Iowa State lost to, what was it, Florida A&M or
Yeah.
some team that, a low tier team. So I think that just them getting up to that start and winning that Alfred Atlantis tournament really raised the bar and expectations for this team. And I mean, yeah, I think they're going into the season. I think the expectation was, obviously to make the tournament. And I think you just kind of look at what they've done recently, and they've really struggled against, top teams. You just going back to, getting back to when they first started the Big Ten play. Yeah, I think there are concerns, obviously, with this team, and I think the biggest concern is just on defense. You look at, that was Michigan's bread and butter, their strength the last 2 years, and now, like I was saying earlier, you look at the stats now, and they're like the worst in the Big Ten, giving up points. So, it is, I guess you could say it is too early. We are just a quarter of the way through Big Ten play, so we're just going to have to see how Juwan Howard adjusts things and maybe adjusts to the strength of this team, and it is just, it's going to be, the longer Isaiah Livers is out, it's going to be tougher. But the one thing for me is just like moving forward, I think Michigan just needs some guys to step up. Like I said, we don't know how long Isaiah is going to be out. The one thing for me is, Franz Wagner, he's had some good games the last 2 games, but the one person to me that's really got to step up is Eli Brooks. He's kind of just been almost non-existent on offense the last 2 games. He is a solid defender one-on-one. He does a lot of good things. Defensively, against Purdue, he was the guy that was kind of chasing around Sasha Stefanovic and really holding him to a quiet game from outside. But man, he's just kind of, like I said, if you look at his stats against kind of like the cupcake teams, and then against kind of the toughest competition, it's been a pretty crazy split. And I think he's been a guy that they really need to kind of show some life on offense to kind of help step up and fill the void with Isaiah out. But I think it is too early to maybe press the panic button, just because, like I said, the Big Ten just been kind of a weird season so far. Like I said, any team is capable of beating anyone on any given night. But yeah, it's just the schedule they have. It's going to be tough for them to pull out wins on the road. They face Northwestern and Nebraska, so those are 2 games maybe they're expecting them to win. But outside of that, the game at Minnesota was a game they had a chance to steal. But yeah, it's going to be one of those years. Whoever wins the Big Ten, they would have 5 losses. Maybe even more. Last season I think Michigan had 5 losses, and they didn't even. They fell a game short of winning a share of the title. So I think it's just. Like I said, I think it's just too early to maybe raise the alarm here and think that they're going to miss the tournament, just because we haven't really seen Michigan make adjustments yet, like we've been talking about on defense. So we'll see what Juwan Howard and them do, what they kind of do to tweak things moving forward. But I think it's a little bit too early to maybe to be concerned about them missing the NCAA tournament, just because the Big Ten's been so good. And I think some projections have 10 teams making the tournament. So
yeah.
As long as Michigan's able to defend home most nights, and as long as they're able to steal a couple of wins here on the road, I think that they'll still have a pretty good shot of making the postseason, just because that Creighton win is still kind of holding up, and that Gonzaga win is probably going to hold up for a while on their resume. But yeah, I just think it's too early to kind of raise concern. But I mean, there are concerns, granted, yes, with this team, but as far as missing the postseason, I think there's still a long way to go before I guess we kind of reach that thing where we kind of start really wondering if this is a team that's even gonna be able to make it to the NCAA tournament.
No, I agree with that. And it's been a wacky college basketball season so far, crazy in the Big Ten, and we have more than half of the conference schedule to go. So, yeah, don't hit the eject button yet, Michigan fans. It could be interesting. So we shall see. Our guest today has been beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, James. It's going to be, I think, a fun February and March. We all know that, and we look forward to having you back on the next visit.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew.
On Quick Hits today, the challenge now for University of Michigan women's basketball head coach Kim Barnes-Arico and her team is to grow from a defeat that stung. Number 17 ranked Maryland, 12-4 overall, 3-2 in the Big Ten, put a 77-49 hurt on the number 24 Wolverines on Sunday at Chrysler Center. Michigan is now 11-5 overall, 2-3 in the Big Ten. Michigan had 14 of its 22 turnovers in the first half, shot poorly from the field, and never could get on track against a very physical Terrapin team. So, as Coach Arico said, they are more than capable. Now they have to get better from a disappointing loss. She said the champions are those who can push through. You've got to continue to persevere. You have to continue to fight. Every night is going to be a challenge, and that is so true. The ladies will be back in action on Thursday on the road in Madison against Wisconsin. Nick Blankenberg scored a goal and added an assist, and Strauss-Mann made 25 saves as hockey defeated number 14 ranked Notre Dame 3-1 on Saturday night at Compton Family Arena in South Bend to complete a sweep of the Irish. The Wolverines earned a crucial 6 points over the weekend, and the sweep was their first on the road since January 2018, when a sweep at Minnesota propelled the 2017-18 squad on a run to the Frozen Four. Michigan heads to Happy Valley this weekend for a pair with Penn State. They are 9-11-2 overall, 4-7-1 in Big Ten play, heading into this weekend's action. Coach Carol Hutchins in softball had their first practice last week and are only weeks away from getting the season underway. They will open play in the Wilson DeMarini tournament in Tampa on February 7th. Coach Eric Bakich in baseball will get practice underway in the next week and will be hard-pressed, of course, to repeat last year's incredible run to the College World Series, but they are expected to be very, very good this year and in the Big Ten race. Make sure you tell your family and friends about the show, like us, or comment about the program wherever you get your podcasts from, and thank you in advance. That will do it for another week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until next time, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!